Because this is really what all these things are about. These practical tips are really just to stir your affections for Christ, because we do need to have strategies. Like, these are actual strategies. They're not just like, oh yeah, we'll sort of get to them and they're good things to do. Like, these are really imperative things that we need to do. Like, we are in a war, we're in a battle where the world is vying for our attention, and we have to put these things in place in order to allow us to stay on the course, to then be able to give out to others and to continue to grow and develop. Oh, getting all tangled up, Landon. That's a 1975 reference for all of you. Listen to their live. Oh man, I've got mud all over me. And there goes my tummy again. Well, hello everyone. Here we are back again with another episode of Thoughts with Sam. I thought that I would probably have something more substantial to say at the beginning of this episode, but to be honest, I'm just going to get straight into it. I hope you're enjoying the background. I'm trying to make an effort to get out into nature. And I say make an effort, but it's really just a massive blessing for me, being able to be in this forest this week with the birds. As usual, love the birds, as you probably listen to in my Worship with Sam's as well. You see or hear all the birds in the background. I just find it helps my brain. And it's just nice to be around creation, and it helps my brain process and think. But to get into this week's episode, I've been doing these for 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks. I've just said 4, 5, 6, 7. Any one of those numbers. I think it's 7 weeks now. Actually, no, we're mid-February, so it's been, about 2 months now I've been doing these, 2.5 months I've been doing these videos. And I had a couple of emails this week from people, and actually, the thing that's quite interesting is I decided on what I was going to do before I read this email, which was yesterday. And someone was asking me about, they were struggling a little bit in their walk. They've recently become a Christian, got baptized, and just really needed some resources or some tips on, what keeps the fire going, what quenches the thirst, and what do I do in my walk? What have I done in my walk to keep me on the straight and narrow and to keep my fire burning? So I thought, what a great opportunity to talk about my routine, my morning routine, things that I do, strategies which I've put in place to keep my fire burning. And I do believe, as I said last week, I have a natural gift of passion and zeal, but also I have sort of the spiritual gift of faith. So I have found throughout my life just my ability to hold on to the Lord when things go bad or things go wrong, more natural than maybe other people. So I speak from that place. So I don't want you guys to hear me thinking, oh, look, he thinks he's perfect, he's got all these things in place. It's like far from that, actually the complete opposite. I'm on this walk, I'm on this journey. I don't know all the answers, but I wanted to share what has helped me, what I do, some thoughts around that, and I guess just some reflections on how we as Christians can encourage one another, but also take responsibility for our own spiritual journeys and our own walks of faith, because at the end of the day, we are the ones responsible. I'm not going to be able to turn around at the judgment day and blame my dad or my mum for not raising me right, or for not telling me to read my Bible when I should have done. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to fly. It's on us as Christians, if we truly believe and have faith and passion that this thing that we believe is worth dying for and worth setting our lives upon, then it's our job and it's our responsibility to reflect and put things in place and strategies in place to keep that fire burning. So I hope this episode will be very practical and pragmatic for you. I know us in the West love the pragmatism and the practical tips. So let's start with my morning routine. Now, this has changed a lot over the years, but one thing that has always been a common thread has been my... And I thought this was normal, but when I went to uni, this had it broadened my horizons to see what people do. But first thing I do waking up is I either have a shower, so I'll reset, have that thing in place, and then straight away I'll go downstairs and read my Bible. And that is a non-negotiable. That is something that is just been there from the age of, I can't even remember when, probably the age of 10. I used to come downstairs every single morning, and that really comes a reflection of my mum. My mum is my spiritual role model, really. Growing up, going to school, she was the one up every single morning at the break of day, really, when the sun came up at the front, at the kitchen table downstairs, and with candlelight, opening the Word, journaling, reading, praying. And that was what I grew up with. That's what my normal day-to-day was. And as I got old enough to start building my own routines and, going to secondary school, for example, that was what I replicated. I woke up at 6:30, and I'd wake up before my dad, before my brother, and I'd be downstairs with my mum, and I'd be reading the Bible. And around the age of 12 was when I then got introduced to some devotionals as well. So my mum walks around the house listening to a radio program called UCB, United Christian Broadcasters. And I grew up with that in the house on her iPad, just constantly this radio program all the time, literally 24/7 in my home. And that ministry has been such a blessing to me really throughout my whole life. And they release a devotional for youth called The Word for You Today. And probably, from the age of 10, 11, I was reading that every morning with my Bible. I'm really annoyed. I literally brought my Bible, brought some devotionals with me, and as I walked out here, it was the one thing I forgot. And as I sat down in this chair, I realised I'd left them in the car, which is rather unfortunate. But, I was going to read an excerpt or two from them to really hit home on how great they are. But I'll let you guys research, or I'll put the links in the description to the websites and things. But I'd say, I don't know I think they're United Kingdom only. I don't think you can get these over in America. So apologies to all my American brothers and sisters. But if you're in the UK, it's completely free of charge. Like, it's genuinely the most simple tip I could give. Get on the UCB website, click, send me the word for today. So as you, basically they have two. They have Word for You Today, which is more the youth focus, and then the Word for Today, which is more of like adults, young adults vibe. And, it's just so easy to read. They are not just faith-based, like they're faith-based in that they have the Bible verses at the bottom, but they are so practical. Things like how to deal with money, things like parenting, and it's just such a blessing. I finish reading the Bible, I pray, and then I open the UCB. As you know, I do the other way around. I finish reading the Bible, I read the UCB, and then I read my other devotion, which I'll get into in a sec, and then I pray. And the UCB has just been that constant throughout I call it the UCB. It's the word for today, but I call it the UCB. And it's been my constant friend, really. And the person who wrote it, Bob Gass, it's sort of a running joke in our family because he has this sort of Irish accent. And on the UCB radio channel, it goes, "The word for you today as," and then it will say, what the word is for today. And it's even my non-Christian cousins joke about it because their mum used to listen to it too. So it's quite a running joke and it's quite fun. But that ministry and that resource has been unbelievable. So I realise I've gone a little bit off tangent, but the Bible and the UCB have been massive. I'll get into what Bible I read in a sec because I know there's a big debate about sort of translations and which one should I read, which one's most biblical, or which one's most specific to the old Greek and Hebrew, and is it literal? Which one should I read? We'll get into that in a sec. But what I do now, which has changed really quite drastically from when I was at school, is that obviously I go to work now, so my morning routine looks quite different, and there's really something in that routines are so important to us as creatures. I think people believe that routines they can almost de-romanticize life, that we should have this spontaneity and that's what makes life worth living. And I completely agree. Spontaneity is so important. And for someone with ADHD and someone who likes change, which is me, routines can be sometimes a little bit, it's so boring and it's not fun. But in reality, honestly, I can't function without a routine. The times in my life where I've gone off the rails and I've been depressed and not full of joy have been when I haven't had solid routines and structures in place. So routines really are the riverbeds that enable the springs of spontaneity to come forth. And that is something that I've learned over time. So I think something I'd give as a tip is just every person's life is going to be different, but you need to try and find routines. One of the easiest ways to do that is to have your first thing in the morning be reading the Bible and praying. And I hope some of these resources will help really stir your affections for that and to incentivize that.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Hey squad, I hope you can see me okay. I've just realized as I've been listening back, because I just listened to a bit of the episode back, that I missed a few things. So I didn't say what Bible I read. I read the NIV study Bible. It's a gold, I don't even know what the word is, but it's got gold on the side of the pages. It's amazing. It's like a fake leather sort of study size. It's not like the big ones. It's not one of the small ones. It's like a really good size. And it's got the study notes in it, and it's just like my favorite thing ever. I love the way it looks. I love the way it feels. That in itself is something that encourages me to want to read it, just because it's just really nice to read, and it's got some great study notes. So I read the NIV. I also study with the ESV. So I use Logos Bible software as well for studies, and I use the ESV for that. I also use the LSB, which is the Legacy Standard Bible, which is like a new version of the NASB. So yeah, I use 3, but the NIV is my go-to standard. I've been reading that for years. So that's the one I mainly use. And then I also missed an amazing resource for you young people, and also just people of any age really, which is called gotquestions.org. It's like the one-stop shop for the hard questions in life. Things like, I was reading today, why did Jesus curse the fig tree? And it just goes through a Bible-based, amazing framework of understanding the context, understanding what was going on at the time, and just breaking down the scriptures, and comes out with a great answer at the end. And I think there's like 780,000 questions that they've answered on there, all the way from Mormonism. Like, it's genuinely, if you've got a question, ask it. That's why it's called gotquestions.org. So that's probably been my most used resource of all time, gotquestions.org. Amazing. And then finally, one of my devotionals that I forgot to say is the Jesus Calling book, which is, my mum has sent that to like every friend she has. It's unbelievable for just having a different perspective on the Bible and faith and the spiritual walk. It just changes your whole mind about scripture, and it's just that daily, it really is just like Jesus speaking to you about who you are in him. And at first I found it quite jarring, because it's like, oh, aren't you putting words into Jesus' mouth? But it's literally all Bible. It's just like the Bible, and she's just changed, like she's put 3 verses together and then creates a biblical truth about it. And it's just like this affirming, it's just amazing. And the thing that's really odd about it, it's not odd, it's just amazing how the things that are in the day, because it's split daily, 365 days a year, seem to line up with exactly how you're feeling. And obviously it's cyclical. Like every year you're reading the same thing, but you obviously forget because it's 365 days in advance. And it's like amazing how uncanny it is when it just hits exactly what you need or what you feel. So those are 3 that I missed, but I wanted to say them. So anyway, back to the regular program. Bye. So for me now, what I do, because I wake up at 5:15 and I leave the house at 6:45. I have to give myself 2 hours in the morning. Bare minimum is 2 hours. Literally before anything else, I give myself at least a 2-hour buffer. And what that does is, I've just, through trial and error, I've realized that it takes me around 2 hours before I can really start whatever that activity is, whether that's work, whether that's going to the gym, whether that's getting up and going on a walk, or whatever is going on in my day. I have to work back 2 hours to know that's when I'm waking up. And I think having consistent sleep patterns and consistent morning routines are really helpful. And we are routine-based creatures and pattern-based creatures. Our brains like that, and we get locked onto those. So keeping things as consistent as possible can really help our spiritual journey and create those spiritual fruit which are good and long-lasting. So for me, I now wake up and I do an ice bath in the morning, which is rather rogue. But honestly, for me as well, I think partly with the ADHD, it's that cold exposure, that discipline that's really sort of, for many people, they don't get it or understand it. And sometimes I don't get it or understand it. it's just so good. You know, I know what I'm going to do straight away. I'm going to put my dressing gown on, go downstairs, let my cats out the kitchen, walk outside, go into the ice bath, take the top off. I have my jazz music, I have my towel, I have everything sort of set up, ready to go. And I get in there for 5 minutes. And I get out, and it's the most humbling thing, like being butt naked in the garden at pitch black with the stars. It's the most lovely thing, though, I tell you. And the dopamine that I get after it, and then straight away I'm in, towel on, dressing gown on, and I'm there ready to make my smoothie in the morning, take it to the kitchen table, sit down, and open the Word. And there's something really powerful, I think, about having these small little like nuggets of incentives. So for me, that used to be like I would make a coffee in the morning. So I would take my black coffee in the morning. I've now realized that consuming caffeine straight away is not great, but this is what I used to do. So I'd make my black coffee, take it to the kitchen table, and that's what I would drink that with my smoothie as well, my protein smoothie, which is my breakfast. I've been doing that since I was 13. And I'd be reading my Bible whilst consuming both of those. And what that did to my brain was it assigned, you know, that nourishment of food with the nourishment of my soul, of the Word. And I've only just realized that now, that, wow, that's actually hit my spiritual food and it's hit my physical food. And it really nourished both of those things. And what that meant is that it assigned my morning, the things that I need, food and breakfast, that requirement that my body is waiting for is now assigned to the Word. So those things just come hand in hand, part and parcel. So everybody has to eat breakfast, or not everyone, but, you know, it's something we need at some point, food in the morning. And being able to align those two things together was really helpful, and it just gave me that consistency where I was, you know, from the age of 9 pretty much all the way up to now, that's been my morning routine. So I've been able to read the Bible cover to cover and, you know, on multiple occasions, because it's like the gym. You don't have to, it's really overwhelming to look at this big book of the Bible and to think, man, I have to read that whole thing. It's the same thing as if you looked at your whole year's worth of training, or you looked at a bodybuilder and you're a stick thin guy like I used to be, and going, man, I have to get from here to there. That's impossible. I'm not going to start. Like, you're just not going to start because you just see how far away you are. Whereas in reality, you need to set yourself small things and trick your brain to just focus on these small incremental wins and gains. And then over time, those things accumulate. And before you know it, you've been able to change drastically from A to B. And that's why it's important to reflect and maybe even journal, for example. It gives you that reflection time to look back and go, wow, that's how I was thinking back then, and this is how I think now. Same thing as the gym with sort of, pictures where you're able to, progress pictures, where you're able to look, wow, that's what I was like 3 years ago, and now this is where I'm at now. And that encourages you to keep going because you see the progress. So that's just a thing on my morning routine. Now, I did want to throw in a few scriptures because ultimately the Bible is infallible, whereas I am fallible. Just around this morning thing, because when I was at uni, many people would disagree with me and be like, no, I'm not going to read my Bible in the morning. I'm going to do it at nighttime. I don't have enough time. I'm too tired. I'm not a morning person. And that's great. You know, I don't know if I am or I'm not a morning person. Quite honestly, I just found that doing this first thing in the morning changed my life. So I guess I'm a morning person because I know how important it is. And I do think naturally I do like the mornings more, especially when I've got good sleep. But I just think it's an excuse to say I'm not a morning person. And the Bible will hopefully back me up on this. So let's look at some of the people who woke up early to meditate or to pray. So Psalm 5 verse 3, this is David speaking. O Lord, in the morning you hear my voice. In the morning I prepare a sacrifice for you and watch. So David, he loved to praise in the morning. Again, Psalm 90 verse 14, satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Oh, I just love, it just sets the day up so beautifully when you have your first fruits for the Lord. And I definitely have been able to attest to this. When I've woken up and I've, say, jumped on my phone straight away, I feel like I'm defiled. Like my brain is now wired to the world. Whereas if I leave my phone untouched, I have a shower or I do my ice bath and I don't look at anything worldly, no news, no Instagram, no Spotify, nothing. All I'm thinking about is clear brain, rejoicing in the Lord, as soon as I open the Word, I feel like I'm a spiritual being that day rather than a fleshy being that day. And some people might say, oh, that's very fatalistic or very spiritual, but I believe it's true. So I'm just going to say what I believe. And then let's finish with Jesus. So Mark 1:35. And rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. That's the Lord going out, Jesus going and doing that. So there are some biblical reasonings for waking up early and setting your first fruits of the day towards the Lord rather than the world and what we do. And I found those things have been really useful around that morning routine. Gosh, I can't get my words out. So that's the morning routine bit. Now, let's talk about some other things which have kept me on fire for the Lord. So one of these things is worship music. As a Christian, as a young youth and growing up, obviously music was massive for me. And as you know, I do worship with Sam, and I did music at school, and that's what I studied at uni. And worship music really has changed my life. I remember the first worship song I heard, like contemporary Christian worship song I heard, it was Our God by Chris Tomlin. When I got Spotify, my dad was one of the early adopters of Spotify. Like 2010, I think we got it. And I think it was 2010 is when I found the Chris Tomlin song, Our God. And literally from then, I just got addicted and hooked Christian worship music. And it was so cool how this music was like relevant and cool and had a really cool sound. It wasn't hymns. It wasn't weird sort of music that I maybe heard at church where there was a screechy woman singing out of tune. You know, it was like actual cool music that I felt like I could share with my friends and be like, look, we're Christians, but we're not weird. And I was even talking to my best man the other day. You know, there's moments in our lives where we can feel our hearts becoming hard and we're not on fire. And actually the thing we want to go to is like our secular playlists, our, you know, hip hop or rap or R&B, whatever that is, and the charts, because we think, you know, that's where we're going to be, that's where our brains are going to be stimulated, that's where we're going to be able to enjoy life. When actually, as soon as we put on a worship song, literally within like the first couple of seconds of the song, I know for me, my heart's instantly stirred and my brain is instantly switched to more of a framework of faith and the Lord and the Spirit. So for me, Christian worship music has been a massive, massive encouragement. So, you know, I know this is something that you will probably do already. So I just say, let this be an encouragement to continue to do that and to see that as like actually like a spiritual discipline. Listening to worship music is like a way to refresh your soul and to set your mind again on the affections of Jesus. Because this is really what all these things are about. These practical tips are really just to stir your affections for Christ, because we do need to have strategies. Like, these are actual strategies. They're not just like, oh yeah, we'll sort of get to them and they're good things to do. Like, these are really imperative things that we need to do. Like, we are in a war, we're in a battle where the world is vying for our attention, and we have to put these things in place in order to allow us to stay on the course, to then be able to give out to others and to continue to grow and develop. So worship music's massive. Some of my favorite artists, Shane and Shane, are amazing, massively biblical, and, you know, great voices. SEU worship as well. I love them. Obviously, you've got like Upper Room and Elevation and Bethel, Hillsong. You know, there's things to say about, oh, are they theologically based? Are they, you know, are some of their church teachings maybe a little bit not truly Bible based, or do they have some issues? Well, I do believe a lot of these churches do have some issues. Every church has issues, some more than others. I'm not going to get into it, but, you know, Stephen Furtick, I don't really align with lots of what he says. I think the way that he speaks and the way that he sort of holds himself comes across quite arrogant, and I'm not really going to, that's another thing, I'm not going to get into that. But, you know, I think I've been able to separate the worship ministries and the songs from some of the churches, and actually, at the end of the day, if they are Bible-based, they're scripture-based, then we can have faith that, you know, we can glorify God in those things. So worship music, massive. Now, let's think of some other things. Books. Books have been massive for me, and I like to read non-fiction, really, And I'm wrestling with, my therapist tells me to read fiction, and I'm wrestling with him at the moment around it because I feel like it's a bit of a waste of time. But I realize C.S. Lewis obviously wrote a load of fiction, so I'm going to actually start reading some C.S. Lewis just to test my brain and to give me a bit of an outlet, so I'm not just getting things from my phone, being able to be creative in my brain through reading. But some non-fiction books that have really impacted me. John Piper writes some brilliant books. Desiring God makes some amazing resources. So there's a great book called Don't Waste Your Life. That's amazing, by John Piper. Jonathan Pokluda as well has some brilliant books, very practical. One that really changed my life at the beginning of this year was around the verse, "Why do I do what I do not want to do?" which is obviously what Paul wrote. And it's that wrestle between our mind and our spirit and our flesh. And it's really practical and it's really Bible-based. So I'd really recommend that book, Why I Do What I Do Not Want to Do. Let's think of some others. Why Revival Tarries is one that I've talked about on this podcast a bit. That's one that I'm reading at the moment, just around revival and passion and zeal. It's that stirring of our souls that can get us on fire. Another is Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus by Nabil Qureshi. Amazing book of a testimony from someone who was devoted to the Muslim faith and to Allah, and who found Jesus and completely became an apologist for the gospel. Some brilliant books. So that's a short list for you. Let's go on to some podcasts now. So just for some backstory, I find podcasts are my friend. I like being alone, and I'll stick a podcast on when I'm in the car, when I'm walking, when I have a spare moment. It keeps me focused. It keeps my mind going, but it also feels like I'm reclaiming some time back from when I'm doing some chores or some things that maybe I can't really do anything else at the same time. So like when I'm cleaning, for example, I'll stick on a podcast and I'll feel like I'm actually utilizing that time for something, not just cleaning, which sometimes can feel like a waste of time. It's not, but you know what I mean? Like doing two things at once. And podcasts and my ears, I'm not really explaining this very well. I think you know what I'm trying to say. Being able to do two things at once, podcasts enable me to do that and feel like I'm doing two things at once. So really quickly, because I don't want this to be too long, I'll wrap this up soon. Reeling off some podcasts and giving some thoughts on them. The ministry, The Porch. Honestly, from 2019, that ministry changed my life. Finding it from a friend who I was in the kitchen with him. It's a young adult ministry based in Texas, Watermark Church. And it's really, the podcast series is just the sermons that they release from ministries on a Tuesday evening. And there's an app which I would recommend, and I'll put in the description as well. I quite like old school teaching, and I quite like things from the past. So I used to devour everything from like pre-2006 all the way up to like 2019, 2021, 2022, before COVID. I haven't really been listening since then. But so many amazing series on dating, on marriage, on the 7 deadly sins, there was this amazing series by Jonathan Pokluda when he was still at the Porch on fantasy, which is around dating, around marriage. What are we looking for in a significant other? Is that just a fantasy in our heads? Is it really Bible-based? I would recommend that to every single Christian. Listen to that series, Fantasies by Jonathan Pokluda within the Porch. So good. And I vividly remember throughout COVID, cleaning my car and listening to these series. I remember one by
Todd Wagner.
Used to be the lead pastor at Watermark, on Samson and Delilah, and just the dynamic between, finding a good wife versus a bad wife, and really what Delilah did for Samson and taking him away.
What I did do, though, is I was committed in a way that was appropriate. I was not focused on serving a woman while I was single. I was focused as a servant of Christ in being a steward of his mysteries and advancing his kingdom, of growing in Christ-likeness in every way that I could. Now I am focused on advancing his kingdom, growing in Christ-likeness in every way that I can, being a good servant of his, and loving this woman in the way that he loves me. And can I tell you something? That is really difficult for me.
Yeah, that's a really great ministry, and I'd recommend it to anybody. I was actually known as as Porch Boy at uni because I just went around telling everybody to listen to the porch. So that's a funny joke for you. Some other ones, as I've said on here before, Ask Pastor John. Brilliant, just very, very practical and hits some really, really deep topics. Becoming Something by Jonathan Pokluda, which is by Harris Creek, as he left the porch and set up his own podcast. He's brilliant. And let's think of some others that I listen to. Views from the Porch is, again, it's like a short form version of the Porch series or sermons, and they stopped recently, but they used to do really, really great ones, and I really enjoy those. And then I'll also just listen to sermons on YouTube as well from people like Paul Washer, Voddie Bauchum, R.C. Sproul, just some of these unbelievably brilliant minds and thinkers who just hit on some such deep topics, biblically based, and they are preaching expositionally. So they will just work through a passage and they will really get to grips with what was the author really trying to say through the pages. And I just recommend those three. Eat your heart out on YouTube. Paul Washer, Voddie Bauchum, and R.C. Sproul. There are so many more, but those for me have been just very impactful in my life. And I think finally, there are sort of the main avenues and resources that I utilize. But there's also something to say about blogs as well. I really like reading blogs, sort of old school sort of news articles and articles. I just find them really helpful. I subscribe to a couple, which I have in my inbox in my email every day. So Desiring God is a massive one, which I use. Just some really, really great stuff on there. It's just when I read it, it's just truth, and it stirs my affections for Christ and often makes me cry and rejoice in that. And then another is Ligonier, which is R.C. Sproul's ministry before he passed. And I listened to many of R.C. Sproul's. He made a load of video series back in the day, and one that's really changed my life is on systematic theology.
When I meet people for the first time, they ask me what I do, and I tell them, and among other things, that I teach in seminary, and they say, well, what do you teach? And I answer by saying I teach systematic theology. Now, when somebody says they teach astronomy, everybody knows what they're talking about, or if they're teaching physics, they know what they're talking about. When I tell people I teach systematic theology, I often get blank stares, and inevitably the question is, what's that? Now, they've heard of theology, but the idea of systematic theology is a term that's become something of an anachronism for an arcane science. And what we're going to be doing now as we embark on this whole new series is go over the whole scope of what we call systematic theology.
Again, I'd recommend it to any Christian, whether you're 5 years a Christian, 1 year a Christian. It just goes through theology from A to Z systematically, giving you the foundational truths to why we believe what we believe. And it helps you be so firm in your faith. And it gives you that stability to go out and preach the gospel to other people and live a radical life in the world as well. So, they are some brilliant ministries. And then maybe YouTube is the last one. Some brilliant ministries on there. I really like Sadie Robertson Huff. She's great. And I like her, just her husband and her. They're just brilliant and real advocates for sort of, I hate to say it, but like cool Christianity. Christians who, first and foremost, their identity is in Christ, but they're also free to go and live in the world and enjoy the pleasures of the world as well. Like just the way that they look, the way that they speak, and the way that they interact with society is trendy. It's winsome, and I think it's accessible for people who are sort of on the edge of Christianity. So I really love them. The circuit riders, of course, how could I continue without talking about the circuit riders? So their ministries is great, and they do worship sets on there, and they do sermons as well on Mondays. Brilliant. And maybe I'll plug my YouTube channel as well. I mean, you're watching this, so I guess you've already found it. But yeah, I think it's important in every single area of your life to have something that's Bible-based or to have something that's faith-based, because you can sort of reclaim that thing where, yes, you can have sort of a variance. You know, like, for example, I watch YouTube and I listen to some non-Christian people on there, and I listen to Christian people on there. But because I have some Christian people in there, I know that it is first and foremost an avenue to hear more from God's word. I feel free to be able to dip my toe in with sort of the other people, because it's not just this sort of dirty space away from my walk. You know, TikTok, for example, could be that. Instagram, I'm sure you guys have a mix of, I don't have any of them, but, you know, there's a mix of faith-based and non-faith-based. So, you know, all power to you guys, but just be aware, be diligent of where your mind's. If you're focusing too much on sort of secularism versus faith, just have people around you. Do that with community. Take it to your small group. Take it to your gals or your guys, and discuss it, and be free to do that. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode. I hope that's been useful, and I hope that stirred your affections for Christ and given you some practical tips. I'll be back next week. I think I'm going to talk about biblical masculinity and biblical femininity. We'll see where we go. But yeah, I love you all. Have a great week.